certified
as a caring adult who pledges to help bullied students.
I will listen carefully to all students who seek my help
and act on their behalf
to put an immediate stop to bullying.
I will work with other caring adults to create a safe
learning environment for all the students in my school.
In my school.
In my school.
In my school.
I'm Dennis Van Rokel, president of the National Education Association. Help us create safe, bully-free learning environments for all students. One caring adult can make all the difference. Be that adult and take the pledge at NEA.org/.
AM 1470, WNN, with more of what you need to know. Get all the latest on health with caller health questions and comments, breaking health news, the health alternative, outrage, and mystery of the week. Dr. Bob Martin Show, Sundays at 10 a.m.
Talk 1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday night at 9 o'clock. That means it's time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a certified sexuality educator and clinical sexologist.
And my big brother.
Yes, indeed.
Pleasure to be with you again.
Same here, same here. Things going well?
Indeed. Yeah. Yes.
Good, good. Why don't you tell the folks
Well, let's get our station ID out of the way. We're live on the radio in South Florida on 1470 AM and 95.3 FM, and also streaming live on Facebook on the page of Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. There's an send email button. We welcome you to submit your comments and questions, or you can give us a call. The phone lines are open at 888-565-1470.
Yes, indeed. And we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call.
Sure. It is a special day, a celebratory day. We're very excited to... Oh, I like how it says Sex Geek over my name. But
very apropos.
Sure. Very excited today. Received in the mail, finally, the hard copy edition of my book, our book, a very wonderful collaborative. Dad, if you're watching, Dad says every time I hold something up, it's crooked. There we go. The Art of Sex Therapy Supervision, this book that I'm very proud to have been a co-editor along with James Wadley, who was a guest on our show a few months back from Philadelphia. And just a whole bunch of wonderful people, friends, colleagues, people we've looked up to and admire, people whose work we've studied over the years. And
it's a good crew.
Yes, indeed. Larry was not only one of our... what do you call them? Outside reviewers, along with Serena McKenzie. Her name changed and got married. I feel terrible. I don't remember her married name, but Serena.
That's all right. We're not going to honor the ownership of the institution.
She's in Canada. One of the wonderful Montreal folks, the contingent in Star, and Twinnet Palmer from ASECT, and you. Right, outside reviewers, but also in addition to being a co-editor, I authored 2 chapters, and Larry was the editor's editor, and clearly I think you deserve more than a free copy of the book for the hours you put in, but, you know, it's definitely a group effort. So I just, you know, besides just bragging about the book, there's a good way to hold it up straight. And, well, see, it's not the kind of book, unfortunately, you know, I can't, like, encourage our listeners and followers to go out and buy the book and read it because it's, you know.
Well, sure we can, but it really
it's not that kind of
it's
book.
Got a professional
Right, it's for
context.
a specific audience, right? It's for supervisors. Now, of course, we hope that it will be more than just sex therapy supervisors, but certainly people who are supervising psychotherapists and medical clinicians to do sex therapy or sexuality counseling should be well trained as
Sure,
a supervisor in a variety of areas.
Absolutely, but I don't think it's even exclusively for supervisors, because I think even people that are wanting to do the work.
Family therapists and supervisors of
but
social
the therapists
workers,
themselves also. I think there's something valuable. Certainly we would encourage them all to be going for supervision and getting the certification, but there's something also very valuable in knowing what's really expected of them as professionals. So even if they're not going into supervision, I think it's still an important read. And I think that's really the thing that I want to emphasize, that this is an important book. It really is. Yes, for people that are going into the supervision, and certainly for the audience that it was specifically intended for. But like I said, every professional who is working with people, who is working with relationships, who has any connection to working with people's sexuality, this is an important thing for them to understand, kind of perspective.
I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say it, because it comes up very often on this show how we're constantly complaining about how conspicuously lacking sexuality is in the training of professionals who should be dealing with sexuality issues, like psychologists, like marriage and family therapists, like physicians, like sexual medicine practitioners.
Absolutely.
Why is it still, I always get this feeling every time it comes up, and it comes up like every other week on the show, right? This grinding frustration of like, why is this so bizarre a notion that PP doctors should know something or two about sex?
Well, because I think there's something almost inherently marginalizing about sex. And I noticed this years ago, and I remember it really struck me one time doing a group of older men. I was doing a sexuality group at a treatment center. Actually, it was more of a halfway house. And, I showed up, and, I was much, much younger, probably in my late 20s, maybe early 30s. And remember, I had long hair and a beard, and I rode a motorcycle. And I show up to this treatment center, and I'm here to talk about sex. And they look at me, and it's like, really? Said, I've been doing this for 50 years. What are you going to tell me about it?
Right.
And it really struck me. And even, again, with professionals, this is one area. I've never heard anybody say, well, I've been depressed before, therefore I'm an expert on depression. Or I had a heart attack, therefore I'm a cardiologist. But the majority of people seem to say, well, I've had sex before, so therefore I know about it.
Oh, of course. Guys in particular would likely say that, even if they're clueless. Right? How many times we have to talk about the clitoris on this show?
I remember even hearing from adolescent girls. One's like 15-year-old. I've slept with 12 guys. I know everything I need to know.
Right. Or remember that one? I don't screw. I make love. And I think she was like 13.
Right.
In a treatment center having sex with adult men for crack.
Exactly.
Yeah. I make love.
Good love making.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess that makes it good then.
Yeah.
Right?
So we've been fighting that stigma in the field for a very long time.
Yeah. I wanted to call out some of our chapter authors, all of them. I really want to give credit all around, because, like I said, it definitely is a team effort. And just looking at the table of contents reminds us of how many areas of the helping professions just have this glaring lack. So,
well, sure. Well, again, I think what you're also alluding to is how broad-based the field of sexuality really is, in terms of the tendrils that we have to really acknowledge.
Of course, we worked together on a chapter on integrating sex therapy and sexual medicines, a drum we've been beating for many, many years, since back, working with, since the earliest days of working with Susan Lee, my late mentor and supervisor. And her supervisor was Michael Perlman, who we were very, very lucky to have as one of the
had some nice words.
And had some nice words to say in the back of the book. Michael Perlman supervised Susan Lee, and he worked with Helen Singer Kaplan, who, of course, kind of started this kind of sex therapy back in New York.
Sure. And, she's a leading figure in the pantheon.
Picking up after Masters and Johnson, adding desire as the missing piece.
Not only is it missing piece, but also making, I think, an important shift, an important change. saying that, not only was
forth.
desire the important first step that they left out, but, looking at some of the other stuff and kind of tweaking that whole model.
Over the history, and again, this awkward, now better, thanks to Viagra, but this attempt at integrating sexual medicine and sex therapy over the decades since then, right? Masters and Johnson was a medical model.
Right.
But they started this biopsychosocial kind of therapy with couples and realizing that it's mental issues that get in the way. Again, Helen Kaplan picked it up with desire and then brought it over to a kind of a psychological, then it went medical again, and now we know. Remember, even when we entered the field, sex therapists were kind of rigidly trained. Somebody comes in, first thing you have to do, send them to a urologist or a gynecologist and rule out organicity.
Right.
And if there's anything physiologically wrong, if it's a medical issue, well, we're not medical. So
Right, exactly.
It's yours.
Not for us.
Now, of course, we realize, and we teach our students, that no matter how medical, there's always a psychological component, right? A guy's not going to feel better about his ED if the doctor says it's because of his high blood pressure and his prediabetes, or it's still psychologically impactful, and therapists need to be able to talk to their patients about it.
One of the silliest things I ever said that got very quoted. That whole idea about the Jello.
Right, sure.
There's always room to do the sex therapy, even if it's a medical
But
issue.
it's critical.
Yeah.
And so the first one that I wanted to mention is Melanie Davis. Of course, we know her going back even to our Planned Parenthood days. And she's a pioneer, in, not just as a sexuality educator, but the idea of I think to me, she reminds me of hospital social work. This idea of hospital sex ed, and really bringing that to a whole host of fields. And she wrote a chapter with a physician. She works in this kind of integrated, the dream team that Marilyn Volker has always encouraged us to advocate for, with a social worker, Melissa Donahue, and a physician named Judith Hirsch. And they wrote a chapter on supervising referral relationships, and more of those, because more and more medical professionals, in particular pelvic floor physical therapists and urologists and gynecologists, and remember we had Stephanie Bueller on, another of our chapter authors, who talked about her new book for pregnant and expecting couples. And again, how often do we talk about obstetrics being like so conspicuously void of sex, and how do people become obstetrics patients?
Right, exactly. We can deliver babies, but we can't talk about how they got
in there.
Yep.
Only how they're going to get out. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So it's wonderful that we have. There's a real foundational thing. Again, some of it just gets a bit nerdy for that very narrow audience, but we do have chapters from some real brilliant people in the field. Doug Braun Harvey, who we talk about all the time, who I quoted throughout my chapter on supervision of cases involving out-of-control sexual behavior. Doug Braun Harvey and his writing partner and our other friend and colleague, Michael Vigorito, also part of our faculty at Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, both have taught for us at Washington. And, of course, their book, Rethinking Sex Addiction, Treating Out-of-Control Sexual Behavior, is considered the gold standard among most of sex therapists, and really the best way of sidestepping this never-ending, frustrating debate, even among our own professional communities, between is it sex addiction, is it compulsivity? No, it's not sex addiction. It's just a whole different approach to envisioning sexual health and having a sex life that fits within your sexual values and isn't incongruent.
No, and I think a key aspect to that too, and one of the things that he points out in that chapter is, a lot of people would look at even just the language and say it's just a matter of semantics. You call it addiction, I call it out of control. It's really the same thing. But I think it's important that even the idea of out of control, which, again, I've talked to both of them about this before. I've always taken issue with that.
But they lead with that.
I know, but I think what's important is that it's about the person's perception.
Of course, and they're absolutely clear about that.
Right. That's what makes it a really good chapter.
Literal out of control sexual behavior, and you've done some research on this with traumatic brain injury.
Sure, you're talking
and
about,
90-year-old guys on Parkinson's meds.
Right,
where all of a
exactly.
sudden their wife comes home from shopping and he's running around the house in her fishnet stockings and high heels, chasing her like, "Who are you?" And he could have
Right.
Alzheimer's on top of it. So
Right.
that's a party.
Right. But I like that,
But
unlike a lot of the addiction
feeling
people.
of being out of control
Exactly.
is a really practical way to start a therapy process instead of telling somebody you're out of control, you're an addict,
Right.
so stop it,
Right.
and work a program of recovery that involves a lot of prayer and meetings. And so immediately there's this bizarre, this is the thing about 12-step recovery that's always been like a pebble in the shoe, that immediately there's this kind of shift where now it's on you, and you better be working a good enough program or it won't take. So, this is the kind of talk of sponsors. You're not hitting your knees. You're not working your steps. You're
Well,
not
I mean,
working a good enough program. You're not going to enough meetings.
It's like a faith healer.
And, well,
You don't believe enough.
unfortunately, we have licensed clinicians in this country like Dr. Drew, whose treatment involves meetings and prayer. And that's,
Right.
that's malpractice. If
I
you
think
ask me.
so. It's at least fraud.
Right. So, Doug, my guru on out of control sexual behavior, actually wrote a chapter on sex therapy group supervision, which is another thing that's like a dying art. Even group therapy, sadly, I am seeing a little bit locally. Some people are getting back to groups, but I think it's a dying art. Even sometimes when people do group, they're not really doing group. They're doing individual with six individuals at a
with
time.
other people watching.
Yeah, and everybody takes their turn. Right?
It's sort of
But
like serial therapy.
The real, the meat when a group takes on a life of its own, and old school group therapy is a wonderful, powerful process, and especially with managed care and money.
That's a big part of it. Yeah,
that's
why you don't
a
see
big part
groups.
of this field too. Like,
Yeah.
while we're always whining and complaining, how many sex therapists do we know? I'm guilty for many, many years until only very recently of, diving into the managed care and insurance world. How many sex therapists say, no, sorry, insurance doesn't pay for it, so I have a cash-only business, which means that it's a little bit of an elitist kind of, sex therapy is usually only available to people with money to pay for it.
Yeah,
And that's
unfortunately.
kind of not fair.
Unfortunately, which,
And
of course, is not fair.
managed care recognizes, as sexual medicine is coming into its own, that there's a quality of life issues that should be covered.
Well, first of all, it should be a non-starter because it is a legitimate. These are legitimate psychological and psychiatric diagnoses,
And
right?
physical.
Right? And even in the medical codes, in the ICDs, these are medical diagnoses. So how can an insurance company say, well, you know what? I don't think we'll cover this medical issue. That's, we don't like that, but this one.
Right.
That's like saying, you know what, we'll cover amputations, but not for arms, only for legs.
But you say sex therapy, and
Right.
remember, I don't remember what the application was for. Maybe something with the VA, I don't know. It was like enlisting in the Army, just filling out this application. And there was no less than 3 pages, tiny font, of all these different sub-areas of psychology recognized by the American Psychological Association. Dozens and dozens kinds of psychology I've never heard of before. Industrial psychology and weird kind of hundreds. Sex therapy was not among them.
No, of course. Well,
It's still
why
not
why
listed
won't
as
insurance
a-
companies cover sex therapy, yet they'll cover equine therapy?
I don't even know who's paying for that. Don't even,
I know.
I can't believe the insurance companies are paying. They have to be because all these drug and alcohol
They're
treatment
all
centers
about
are
insurance.
working on insurance
Yeah.
reimbursement.
Yeah.
And there's no research basis. I have done the literature review personally. All the research on equine therapy is about autistic kids
Right.
and really problem kids. Right? There's no research on equine therapy in addiction, but it's the most popular thing, except the real high-end concierge treatment centers.
So they actually have horseback
Because-
riding.
No, I know this also from a very trusted source. The rich folks, the real spa treatment centers, they don't have equine therapy because they can't get the insurance because no matter how many waivers people sign, if somebody gets hurt getting kicked by a horse or something. So
Yeah.
the high-end treatment centers don't do equine therapy.
More
They-
for liability.
Yes, because they know rich people
okay.
are going to sue them if a horse kicks them.
Interesting.
Somebody who they just scooped up off the street or the Dunkin' Donuts in Delray because they have insurance. They're not right. They're happy to take them out to the horse farm once a week. Hey, everybody loves it.
Sure.
The patients love it because they can get the hell out of the treatment center for once.
Right, and they don't have to do any work.
Does it keep them sober?
No.
Right? That really
No, of
sad,
course it doesn't.
right? John Oliver did a piece on that.
Right,
And the kid, amusing as it was, unfortunately, by the end of the piece, he revealed that he was dead.
Right.
The kid saying, how is this going to keep me sober?
Mm-hmm.
How is petting horses and having the in-the-moment therapeutic value of the horse's natural feedback? Yeah, that'll keep you from shooting.
First of all, you know what? Let's go back to the book.
Yeah, right on.
I'm getting angry.
Right on, yes. So, of course, we have our friend Dan Water, brilliant man, just renowned expert in sex and ethics and ethics for psychotherapists in general. I know he served on the board for the state of New Jersey and just a monster guy. A fascinating chapter on forensic sexology evaluations. Therapy with sex offenders is an entirely different world than therapy with people with sexual dysfunction.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's another field that is really, really heavy on criminal justice and really light on sex.
Well, because remember, for years, right? For years, it's just been assumed that there really is no treatment for sex offenders. So why bother?
Yeah, people really do know, I think, on some level, that sex offenders have the lowest recidivism than any other kind of criminal. Right? Somebody who's busted as a sex offender is less likely to repeat their crime than someone who's busted for stealing cars or slinging dope.
True. True. Because these are often crimes of opportunity, but not necessarily
stigma,
desire or intention.
Meanwhile, we don't have our wheel of outrage. What was that in the news in Idaho? A guy was on trial for, it was a perfect catch a predator sting.
Yeah.
But the lawyers managed to get him so that because he was committed to his church-based recovery program for sex addiction, he just got probation and didn't have to register as a sex offender.
Right, because he was really more of a sex addict and he's already dealing with it, so
he's
leave him
committed
alone.
to his program.
Right, don't mess up his recovery.
Where's Chris Hansen when you need him?
Right.
I was outraged, but that's going to be the wave, and I think that's why.
Well, I think you really are.
This conservative political undercurrent to this whole sex addiction debate, because there's a lot of people that really, really want there to be such a thing as sex addiction.
And now that the World Health Organization acknowledged compulsive sexual behavior, the entire sex addiction industry has morphed into that. They've taken over that, and I guarantee you that is going to be more and more legal application for the explanation for sex offenses.
Got to tell you, a USA Today article from Rob Weiss is hardly a academic resource to be citing as a reference for, hey, it's official. Rob Weiss said so.
Anything written by Rob
USA
Weiss is
Today.
not an academic resource.
I have to say something about our dear old friend Neil Cannon, who wrote a powerful chapter with Amanda Sasek, marriage and family therapist in Colorado, on that whole systemic piece, right? The sex therapy through a systemic lens. And of course, we know that there's a whole bunch of therapists who are trained, usually marriage and family therapists, who tend to adopt this systemic view. Of course, it came out of a very lovey-dovey hippie notion back in the early days of marriage and family therapy, when they were all about, we're not about diagnosing. We just look at the whole system. We don't want to have the identified patient. If it's the couple is the patient, the family, it's the whole system. Right. Until they realize they can't get reimbursed from insurance without having a disease model. Right? If you call the insurance and say, what's the diagnosis? And they say, no, we don't believe in diagnosing. Again, click. So they've adopted a disease model like everybody else, but there's still a very definite way of taking a systemic approach. In effect, all sex therapy should be systemic.
It is inherently systemic because nobody lives in a vacuum in terms of their relationships and their sexual expression.
There's a complaint that always makes me chuckle over the years that a certain approach to sex therapy, like the Masters and Johnson Sensate focus, is too focused on sex. Like,
that is a problem in the sex therapy work that we're doing. We just talk too much about sex.
Just too much, and ignores these kind of relational and intergenerational, which I just call shenanigans.
Yeah, that's never been a valid criticism.
Ignore those. But yeah, I guess it's true as movement in the field that to make sure that sex therapists have enough foundation in couples therapy, which
again, I think most I think that's one thing about the field of sex therapy.
Don't have a lot of experience with couples.
You're right. A lot of them don't, and they, that's not about them being sex therapists. That's just about their background, because sex therapy is inherently contextual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And with all the different, again, the bio, the psycho, the social, the spiritual, the relational, the affectional, I mean, all of those things.
The spiritual, we need an hour show. We need sponsors. Spiritual elements. We have a powerful chapter by Tina Sellers on working with conservative Christian clients.
Yeah.
And her book, we have to have her on the show talking about her book. I forgot the name of it offhand, but it's about Christian shame and how even conservative Christians have sex and have issues and problems and need to be able to be given the permission. And
I heard sometimes they even like it.
There's so much. Sometimes there's so much subconscious bias, even among therapists, when a problem walks in their office, that they just automatically, whether it's affairs or same-sex couples. Why should a therapist tighten up? Oh, my God, I have a lesbian couple coming to see me. Do I know enough about lesbians? How about you worry about that couple that's coming in and find out what their issues first,
right?
Before you worry that's out of my wheelhouse. I have to refer. I don't know how to deal with the gays. But there's a lot of therapists.
That's another thing we've kind of railed around
all over
for a
the country,
long time.
even in urban areas, even in New York, even in South Florida. There's a lot of therapists go, I have to refer. I don't know how to deal with the gays. It's 2018. Margie Nichols, a pioneer in the trans community, the trans work, wrote a chapter on supervising therapists working with transgendered clients in the 21st century. Because, we're 20 years in.
That's
it's
right.
about time. My partner in Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, Rachel Needle, wrote a chapter on sex therapy through that psychological lens, because again, you've taught psychology forever, and I've worked with psychologists, but remember, I'm not one, and always feel like both of you and Rachel, you speak a language that I don't understand. So I'm glad for this chapter specifically speaking to psychologists and sex therapy through their lens. But all of it just comes back around to the fact that there's a collaborative need. Of course, sex therapy pioneer Gina Ogden provided the second to last chapter on creating empathic collaboration in sex therapy supervision. And of course, she talks about her 4-dimensional wheel as a practical approach for supervisors, therapists, and clients.
Right, which, by the way, I'm glad that she's referring to it now more the 4-dimensional wheel.
Yes. Yes. We just got a couple minutes left.
Actually, one more minute, our final minute.
James Wadley, my co-editor, wrote the final chapter on the future of sex therapy supervision, and I'm happy to say that the future is bright. We just hope that this book finds its place as just the first, but only the first of many.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a second volume or
hoping
second
it will.
edition.
Yeah. And if people wanted more information on either the book or how they can work with you, how could they get a hold of you?
I can be reached. You can shoot an email. Get in touch with me through the Facebook page if you're watching us live streaming. Just hit an email there, Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, or email me at ricky@modernsextherapy.com. My phone is area code 561-809-1080. And this baby, The Art of Sex Therapy Supervision, can be found on Amazon and soon your local bookseller.
That's right. For those of you who have a local bookseller.
Is that our time?
That is our time.
I don't hear the music.
No, it's not been cued yet, but we're pretty much right about there. Here we go. That's it.
Now we can say you know what the music means.
That's right.
Thank you very much, my Droog.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for joining us, and please join us here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
That's right. Stay sexy. Have a great night.
Good night, Dad.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions expressed on the preceding